Welcome, my dear audience and friends, to another episode of Cancer Convos with Grace B. This is your girl, Grace B, coming to you from New York City, the city that never sleeps and is home to Cancer Convos with Grace B. I'd like to thank you guys for connecting and engaging with me all the time and giving me your amazing support on all my platforms on YouTube, on Instagram, and Facebook. For those watching for the very first time, this show seeks to demystify cancer by bringing on experts and stakeholders who will be giving their takes on the disease and other affiliated topics. I must continue to underscore that you go for your checks. Do that. Health is the real wealth. Question everything. Research everything. If it's possible, go for third, fourth, even fifth opinions. So today's show will highlight a very pertinent subject which concerns not just cancer patients, but everyone alike. As the saying goes, everyone wants to go to heaven and nobody wants to die. So many would seem that have cold feet when discussing this issue that I'm going to be discussing today with my guest, because they fear that death is being wished upon them, especially in the part of the world that I come from, Africa. So today, joining me on this episode is an amazing attorney who serves clients in the areas of estate planning and probate by addressing issues that may arise in their estate. She puts people across, puts people through the process of managing and distributing property after death by simplifying the process for themselves or their loved ones. She is also an author and has a very interesting blog called An Organized Afterlife, after in brackets, which I find very interesting and helpful. I shall be sharing the links to this on all my platforms, so watch out. So, without much ado, let me welcome Jennifer Gumbel to the show. Welcome, Jennifer, and so good to see you today. Thank you for coming on.
Oh, thank you so much. And I'm very happy to be on talking about this.
Oh, wow. So great to see you. Hope everything is going okay,
It
work-wise?
is. It is. Yep.
Awesome. Awesome. So like you heard me introduce the topic, everybody wants to go to heaven and nobody wants to die. We want to be saints and not sinners, right? But many definitely have cold feet when it comes to discussing probate issues like
They
wills
do.
and trusts and all
Yeah.
that, because they seem to fear that death is being wished upon them.
Mm-hmm.
So, what would you now say is, or what do you think? You're the lawyer, you're in charge. What would you think is the reason for one's fear of taking this important step of sorting themselves out before the unexpected happens? What do you think?
Well, I think it kind of boils down to two issues. I think the first thing is that these topics, wills, trust, probate, avoiding it, we don't really get good information. It's not like we get this in high school, and so it can be a little overwhelming and a little intimidating. Trying to find a lawyer. A lot of people have never dealt with lawyers outside of this stuff, and so that can be intimidating.
Even dealing with lawyers is scary business
Yeah,
too,
it
right?
can be. Yeah, absolutely. It can feel intimidating.
Intimidating,
And
yeah.
then you add in the biggest factor, which is our culture has a really difficult time internalizing the reality that we all live on kind of limited time.
Mm-hmm.
And even broaching the topic sometimes can feel uncomfortable.
Absolutely. Yeah, I know. It is scary, actually. So anyway, let's go
Let's make
straight
it
into.
unscary.
Yes, let's make it unscary. Hence, you're here to walk us down this route, which,
Yeah.
we can't avoid. It's something we have to deal with sometime in our lives. So, um, what exactly is an estate and what is the concept of estate planning? Because when I was growing up, When I'd hear my parents talk about estates, I'm like, but I mean, we're not rich.
The grand
Yes,
estate.
yes, the Grand Old Duke of York kind of
Right.
thing
Yeah.
with, great vines and plantations and all sorts of things like that. My parents were
Very
ordinary
down Abbey.
civil servants, but they were talking about estates until
Yeah.
they explained to me. So for those of us who still have the notion that I did, what exactly is estate planning?
Well, estate planning, I think of it as just what are the legal issues that will come up when you pass away, and relatedly, if you're incapacitated, if you can't do things for yourself for a
Hmm.
short period of time or for a long period of time. And to me, that's estate planning. It's thinking through those legal issues and then
Hmm.
reducing them so that you don't have a grieving person having kind of an overwhelming to-do list. There's going to be things that they'll have to do, but when you don't think about it, when you don't have things organized, it really becomes unmanageable. And
Complicated,
yeah.
yes. Yes, and complicated even for those that are going to be succeeding you,
Hmm.
so
Yeah, and
that,
that's really what this is all about,
hmm
is someone will have to deal with those legal issues. And if it's not you doing a little bit ahead of time,
hmm
then you may be leaving something really unmanageable for people grieving you. And that's what we want to try and minimize.
awesome. Yeah. So could you tell the difference, you walk us through the difference between a living will
Hmm.
and a last testament? Are they the same? Because we hear
They're
them mentioned side by side and we don't know
yeah,
what
the words
they're
are
saying.
extremely similar. And you do your will when you're living. There's no other option than that. So it seems odd that they are different things, but they are. And it's
Mhm,
really really important to kind of understand when you're getting documents what they're actually doing, not
mhm,
just signing and then saying okay, shoving them on a wall, but really understanding what you've done,
mhm,
and what this thing is accomplishing. So a living will generally refers to some sort of healthcare decision making, or naming someone who will be doing decision making for you if you can. It really focuses on the healthcare issues.
mhm.
And different states will call these different things. My state uses healthcare directive, which I really like because it doesn't sound like will.
What
It doesn't.
state are you in?
I'm in Minnesota.
I know,
Um,
just so that people
right?
know.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
we're a little bit colder right now.
No, you don't come across as such.
But um, thank you. But but a will is a set of instructions for what to do for those legal issues that come up, and it usually covers a few things. So if you're a parent with young children, that's a place that you can designate a guardian. But the vast majority of legal issues for most people will involve their assets.
Okay.
Now, a will isn't going to tell us what to do with every asset. There are assets that, in and of themselves, tell us what to do, like a life insurance policy. That usually tells us a name that the company will write a check out to.
Right.
But the things that are stuck goes by default into your estate, and that's the technical term for estate. And that can be a little bit of things, or it can be a lot of things. Most people will leave an estate. It could be just a house, an apartment full of goods,
Exactly.
and that's it. Or it could be, it can be large, it can be small, it can be made up of different things.
Yeah.
Um, and the will is going to tell us what happens to your estate. If your estate is big enough or has certain types of assets, that's where we talk about a probate process, which is
Hmm.
a court process to make sure the right person is doing the things under the will, that the will is the right thing to be looking at, and all of those things.
Hmm.
But a will doesn't avoid probate. It just tells us what to do to your stuck things.
Voila.
Um, and 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 if you don't have one, then we're looking at state law, which works for some people, but it doesn't work for everybody. So it's a way to say what should happen to the things that aren't already telling us what to do.
Absolutely. I get that. So what is a trust?
That's a really good question. And I get the
Because
question.
that's why it's confusing because
Yes, yeah,
they
and it
they
starts sounding
they
really
stipulate
complicated. Yeah.
similar
So
stuff, but there's a difference, right?
Yeah, there is a difference. Yeah. So a trust is a method of making an asset tell us where it's supposed to go. And so if you hear, everyone should get a trust so they avoid probate. First of all, if anyone says everyone should do something with estate planning, they're full of crap. Because everyone's different. Every state's different on how this stuff works. In my state, in Minnesota, our probate process isn't awful. It's a lot better than some other states.
Okay.
And so we use trust a lot less than some other states do. And we have a lot of other ways to get things to move that maybe aren't options in other states. But a trust is when you own something, it's just a method of ownership that's a little bit different than normal. So when you normally own something, then to control it, you get to decide what happens to it. You get to use it. If you sell it, you keep the money. Benefits and control are all kind of wrapped up in one.
Okay.
And a trust separates out those things.
Oh,
So
wow.
it can have a lot of uses. You can put things into a trust and have one person control and another person benefit. So if someone's
for example, I have a child that was underage, right? And then it's stipulated that the child has to be like 18 or 21.
Yes.
So that is stipulated. So that's a trust, right?
Yeah. So, and there can be kind of different forms of dealing with the minor stuff, but usually if you're setting up some rules of the road in your will that says if my child's under a certain age, then this adult is going to control the money for them for their benefit, and the child will benefit from that money, then that's a trust. Now, that's a very common trust, and that's actually something that most parents should be doing. But it's not going to immediately pop up, and it's not going to pop up during your lifetime because it says, well, once I die, if my children are under a certain age. So they can be really useful vehicles. But to avoid probate, you have to have your assets tell us that it's supposed to be controlled by the trust. And so that takes a lot of organization. And sometimes that organization, it can outweigh the benefit you're trying to get out of it. So it really, whether or not you should have a trust as part of your estate plan, really depends on your particular situation. And it really depends on your state, whether or not your probate process or you have easier options. But also, how financially organized are you going to be able to be? Because a trust isn't a magic wand. And if you have some assets that don't say they're governed by the trust, you may have a trust and you may still have a probate process, because then you have things in your estate that don't say where they go.
Okay. So before I forget this, one should avoid probate issues, right?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, because I see people that like die interstate. Okay, they're survivors or whatever, go through a lot of issues trying to get a power of attorney, trying to do so many things. So that's where the necessity for writing a will, leaving a trust, and everything comes into play. If not, I think you pay a lot of money to your state, right?
Okay, so here's kind of like how this all works, right?
Right.
Okay, and this question kind of helps me fit all of these ideas together of like, okay, there's a will, and that's the probate and the estate. So if a probate may or may not be a good thing, or it could be an awful thing. The first thing is, what does your state require? Some states require really difficult things. There are some states that require a resident of that state to be your executor.
Okay.
And we have a lot of snowbirds, and if you're the snowbird in that state and you have no relatives, then your relatives might be paying someone down there to be the executor. Or some states have really high probate fees. But some states don't. A lot of states don't. And so the probate in Minnesota is one of them, where probate isn't necessarily the worst thing in the world. And there are a few families where we talk things out and we figure out that probate might actually be beneficial, because it freezes everything for a little bit. And in my state, it's not too long to just kind of see what's there, and then appoint someone who has the responsibility and is answerable to the court to make sure things go where they're supposed to go. So it really depends on your state. It also really depends on, I call them the squirrels, the people in your family. And different families are squirrelier than others.
Tell me about it.
And so some families, we can kind of see issues that will arise if they have to coordinate. And if we see that, then we say, okay, either a trust, usually not in my state, sometimes. In some states, the answer is more of going to a trust. In my state where it's not so bad, a lot of times I'll say, look, let's plan for this to go through probate. Because all things considered, it's going to be easier for everyone, and it's going to bring its value because we have a very structured process. So
Okay.
if the idea is, if you kind of look at everything and say, okay, how do we avoid probate? Well, the idea is you want to have your estate as small as possible so that it's not triggering probate. It's not triggering the need for the court to appoint a personal representative.
Okay.
People who try, who have a trust or they're trying to avoid probate in some way, will still probably have an estate, still have some stuck assets because your household goods, there isn't a sheet of paper where you can easily say, well, when I die, then this goes too. You could put that in your will, but your will says what to do about your estate. It doesn't make anything automatically move. So,
Right.
and the calculation really comes down to, if you're making things move automatically, a trust can be a vehicle for that. Another vehicle for that can be payable on death designations. That's something for bank accounts. Or in my state, we have deeds where we say not a moment until they pass away, but if they have
Right.
this real estate when they pass away, then it can go to these 3 kids. Now, if the 3 kids get along great, then that's more efficient than a probate process. So then we do that. But if the 3 kids do not
Do
get
not see
along
eye
great,
to eye. What happens to the 3 kids
right?
that don't
Then,
see eye to eye?
exactly. Then we look at that and we say, there are going to be legal problems with these 3 people owning property together.
Absolutely.
And so we're going to do the probate instead, because that's probably going to be much easier than these 3 kids owning together.
To
And we make that
settle.
calculation.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And some other states might be, well, the probate's really bad, so then they may be looking at a trust. But trusts don't automatically apply to anything you have. You have to coordinate those things with a trust, and that's where a lot of things can go off the rails.
Yeah.
You have to be ready to be financially organized
You have
along
to
with it.
be always. I mean,
Yeah.
these are things that you have to be on top of. But a lot of people have this notion that I'm not rich. I don't need a will.
Mm-hmm.
I just have 2 cents. What is it I'm going to leave to my family and whatever? But so how would you go about trying to convince that person that, listen, they
Mm-hmm.
do need a will, even if they have a sheet of paper? How would
Well,
you go about
yeah.
telling
So
them that?
I wouldn't really try to convince someone that they need a particular document because
Okay.
every situation is different. Every once in a while, I get a handful of people. It's extremely rare.
Mhm.
But where what they want is no different than what the state puts in place for them.
Yeah.
And in that case, okay, they might be okay, or but everyone's going to have legal issues if they're incapacitated, um, and when they pass away.
Mm.
So when we think about estate planning as more than just, do you have a will or do you have a trust, and think about it as, what legal issues are we reducing?
Right.
Then everyone needs to do that. If you're an 18-year-old kid who has, no money, no
Mm-hmm.
kids, you still need, now that you're an adult, you need to think about the question of, if I'm incapacitated, that's going to cause a legal issue because my
Yeah.
parents can, and nobody can insert themselves into the situation anymore. I'm an adult, and no one gets to do that automatically.
Mm-hmm.
So everyone needs estate planning, and at every stage of life, you need to do estate planning, and it's going to look different as you go through different stages. Um,
Absolutely.
but it's,
Yeah.
yeah, going back to that question of what legal issues are going to come up and what can you do to make those easier.
Yes. And to kind of make people see reason. to kind of sort out their estate, regardless of how many sheets of paper they have.
Right.
Not that you're trying to convince them, but you're trying to let them know that it'll be worth their while if that is done. Right.
Yeah, and the tool, the documents are just tools
Mm.
in the organization or reducing the legal to-do list.
Mm-hmm.
And that takes a particular evaluations. Some people, a will is going to be extremely important, and some people it's going to be important, but not, but not earth-shattering. Or some people, it's really no different than what the state would do already.
True.
So it can be a wide spectrum.
Yeah, like let's go back to what you said earlier. You were talking about people faced with um, health problems.
Mhm.
So for people like us that have faced cancer or any other person with a debilitating disease, what kind of I was going through doing my research before reaching out to you, and now saw that actually there's a document called the Advanced Healthcare Directive. Please explain what this is all about, what it entails, and how it helps us patients or
Yeah.
survivors.
So, first of all, if you have an illness, you've probably heard about this because um, medical facilities want people to have these things. I know
Okay.
where I go, just about every time they check in with you, they're asking you if you've done it and put it on file.
Oh,
um,
wow.
because they don't want to be looking around at family wondering who they should listen to.
Family
So
issues and who they should reach
yes,
out to. It's going to be
yes,
complicated,
yeah.
right?
So there you can have a legal document in place, and every state's going to have different requirements.
Hmm.
So you're going to be a little cautious about taking stuff online because it might not fit the state that you're in. um, I know where I'm at, our medical providers are based in Minnesota, and so I'm comfortable with what their legal department puts together. um, but you really want to ensure that whatever you're doing is meeting the requirements
Of the
that
state.
yeah, of the state that you're in. Otherwise, it's not, it may not be worth the paper that you've written it on.
Hmm.
But the advanced directives, healthcare directives, living wills, all of these things cover a way to communicate, or at least appoint someone who can communicate for you if you can't communicate what you want for your healthcare decisions. It's a little bit like a healthcare power of attorney is another term that gets used. But it tells the hospital who to look um, to be told what to do if you can't tell your providers what
Communicate
to do.
if you can't
Yeah,
communicate, or you're so incapacitated, right?
right. And then you start to think through decisions. What do you want? Do you want all out care? If there's any chance of, if there's any chance you want all out care, or if there's no chance of recovery, do you just want to be comfortable and not have life, things sustaining your life just to sustain life but not improve? So all of those things are extremely personal. I tell clients that those are decisions above my pay grade.
Hmm.
But if you have opinions on those things, it's really important to communicate them.
Yes. So, like you said, that is a kind of healthcare power of attorney. So, for the power of attorney, when would you advise anyone to get the power of attorney?
I love that question because that's maybe the document that I talk most people out of. I love
Okay.
it and I use it a lot. But it's extremely powerful, and depending on your state, again, sometimes it can be quite powerful to the point where it's maybe not comfortable to do. Um, and so power of attorneys allow someone to act on your behalf for finances. It doesn't replace you. It just allows someone else's signature to work for you.
Hmm.
And some states you can say, this person doesn't have the power unless I'm incapacitated.
Hmm.
The problem is that, how do we know someone's incapacitated? You bring this to the bank to try and use it, and the bank's saying, how do I know this person is incapacitated? So
Hmm.
some states will say, we don't want to know that. If did you sign it? Okay, they can start acting, and that's what my state does. Um,
Okay.
and and they don't replace your ability to act on your own finances.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't trust somebody with signing, with a probate
Documents and,
checkbook,
yeah, and
um,
taking care of your finances.
yeah, then it's a document you probably don't want to do. Now, if you do trust somebody enough where you could sign every check in your checkbook
Mm-hmm.
and hand it to them, then it can be a really helpful document, because if you're incapacitated and it's for a long period of time, then there's probably that, and there isn't something in place for someone to take care of your bills,
Mm-hmm.
then the only other option is having a court process where the court says you can't make decisions for yourself anymore, and we're inserting someone to do that for you, which is a really big thing. It's much bigger than a power of attorney, but powers of attorney can help prevent those court issues because
Yeah.
someone can already jump in your place.
Now, do power of attorneys have, what should I say, durations? You could make someone a power of attorney for a year or 2 years or 3 years, depending on your healthcare
Yeah,
situation, right?
you can absolutely do a wide variety of things with a power of attorney. They're very flexible documents. Now, in my state, we have a
Flexible.
we have a certain form
Mm-hmm.
that has teeth to it. If we don't use the form, then we don't have the same teeth to make a bank follow it. So we love using our form in my state. But even
Okay.
on our form, you can say, well, I only want this for a year. I want this to expire at a certain date.
Mm-hmm.
Or I want this only for particular transactions. Maybe you're running a business and you say, well, I just want I don't want this person in my private life, but I want this person to do the same things for my business.
Yeah.
You can narrow it down. Um,
So you can have several power of attorneys compartmentalized for different things,
you
for different
could,
people,
yeah, you could. Now the
or you
problem
just
is,
one person.
yeah, the problem is that's a lot of cooks.
A lot of cooks
So,
spoiling the broth, I tell
right,
you.
right. So that could become difficult.
Yes,
But they're very,
complicated. Yeah.
yeah, but they're flexible. They can be flexible.
Okay.
Um, you just have to understand the power that you're conveying when you do it, and
Right.
make sure that you're comfortable with that person having that power.
Okay. That's fantastic. So, what has been your biggest challenge while dealing with your clients regarding probate issues? What has been the
Yeah.
biggest challenge? What has not? I wouldn't say irritated, but you'd be like, oh God, why can't they just listen to me?
Well,
Yeah.
my biggest frustration, and I think it's more with the industry than the people that I work with, because
Wow.
again, there's not, you can Google a lot of stuff, but I feel like there's so much information that's kind of made, it's professionals making them for professionals,
Yeah.
and it's all 1,000-foot level that for issues that don't apply to the vast majority of people.
Hmm.
Um, is that people don't understand that estate planning has documents to it. You'll probably have some sort of document, healthcare directive at minimum,
Hmm.
but a will, in rare cases for us in my state, a trust. So you'll probably have some legal documents, but um, but just as important as those documents is the financial organization to it. So I'll give you an example.
Hmm.
Um, if someone is married and they get a life insurance policy, they'll probably put their spouse on as the beneficiary. And let's say this couple gets a divorce, and we'll pick the husband is really on top of things, and he goes into a lawyer and says, "I just got a divorce. I want to make sure that my ex doesn't get anything, and I'm going to do a new will and all that stuff." So
Yes.
they redo the estate plan, but they don't think about the financial organization. They just think about the legal documents. The legal documents can be great, but if he's not going back to change the beneficiary on that life insurance policy,
She still gets it.
then that may be going to her.
Mm.
So it really takes financial organization. And avoiding probate isn't about the documents you have in place. It's about the financial organization. Who owns this or is set to own this when I die?
Hmm.
The first thing I do when I deal with couples who own land together and real estate together is that I want to look at the deed, because if the surviving spouse
Mm-hmm.
should own it without restriction, that we're not placing any controls on it, vast majority of situations, then I don't want to have to do a probate just because something was missing on their deed. And that's how this it's how this works.
Works. Mm-hmm.
So I always look at that deed to say, okay, does the deed tell me that the survivor gets it all, or does the deed tell me they own it together, and if one of them dies, then it goes into their estate, which will probably end up with the spouse, but it still has to go through the estate.
Mm-hmm.
So there's financial organization, understanding what you have and how you own it, and where does it go if you die.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the answer is nowhere, and so by default, that's your estate. For some people, that's the right answer. For some people, that's not. But knowing all of that so that it coordinates into the documents and the plan that you've come up with an attorney.
Okay, oh wow, that's really eye-opening, because when people, for example, a couple that have been together for so long, and
Mm-hmm.
then one of them is now probably incapacitated health-wise and everything.
Mm-hmm.
That is something that is very scary
Yes.
to both parties,
Uh-huh.
so that the estate doesn't go elsewhere, because you find out that a lot of times the estate goes elsewhere if nothing
Yeah.
is, like you rightly said,
Or,
if nothing is put together.
right. And I get this a lot with blended families because
Exactly.
intestacy law works great with the cleavers, because usually it's pretty easy to figure out what the cleavers would want. But for the Brady Bunch, it's really hard to figure out. Every blended family that I've ever dealt with is different in some way. Whether that's, do we include your kids with my estate plan? Do we include our kids as our kids, or is my estate going to my kids and your estate going to your kids? And there's a whole lot of factors behind that. And so there's just what the state would do for those couples.
Mm-hmm.
They have in my state, they have a formula, and it fits almost nobody in real life.
Yeah.
It's the best you can do because everybody's so different in that way. So, it's really important to really understand what your needs are, and then work with somebody who can strategize that and help you put those documents together, and then match that financial organization piece into it.
Yes.
That it all is doing what everyone thinks it's going to do.
Like you rightly said, work with someone, because you find out that a lot of people are confused.
Mm-hmm.
All the legal jargon, they don't want to make mistakes, and you find out that a lot of them don't even take those decisions or initiatives because they're scared of the outcomes,
Right.
because they haven't been told, or probably properly advised as well.
Mm-hmm.
So
And
yeah.
and the other big frustration for me is where people don't want to deal with it, and then so they just kind of leave it. And then we have unnecessary legal issues that people who are caregiving have to deal with, people who are grieving a loss have to deal with, that we could have easily avoided.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a major frustration for me, and that's why I'm so vocal about this stuff, is that if you just take it as a thing that adults do, is financial organization and thinking through the questions of, if I die, because we're all going to sometime,
Mm-hmm.
but if I die and I own this asset, where's it going to go? And then what kind of documents do I need to get that accomplished?
Mm-hmm.
If you take care of it now, then the person grieving you, the person caretaking for you, isn't going to have to do that on top of all of the other things that they have to deal with.
Absolutely. It's just a lot of load to carry.
Mm-hmm.
So it's best to start preparing it prior to all those issues that would actually surface, once there's death. Yeah, that's a can of worms opening up, I tell you.
There's really not a whole lot of fixing that can be done after someone passes away. It kind of have the rules that apply.
Has to be done before. Yes, absolutely. Wow, this is so interesting. I'm so happy about this. So, being an estate planning attorney, walk us. We've heard you explain a lot of things. Just walk us and say, Grace, walk that viewer now. Say, from day one to day infinity, this is what you're going to be doing. step by step.
Okay. Okay. So I'll kind of walk you through coming into my office and that process
Mm-hmm.
to make the plan, get the plan working, and then the
Yes.
process afterwards, right? Because
Okay, please
things
do.
shift and change, and what do you do? So um, there's a few things that I ask about when I meet with somebody.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know what they have. I want to know where they want it to go. And are there any concerns with those things automatically going where they want it to go? So if I'm talking to someone who has one child that they trust implicitly, that has a great head on their shoulders, married great. If that kid dies, then you totally trust the in-law to control that money for the benefit of your grandkids. Then I'm looking at a situation where automatic transfers are probably going to work really well. We probably want to get as many things as we can to automatically go to that child.
Mm-hmm.
And that totally changes the plan and what then the documents we needed to do to get that in place.
Okay.
Now we could have another situation where someone comes in and they say, well, I have 5 kids and here I'm in farm country. So I have 5 kids and one of them is a farmer. 4 of them are not farmers. They've never farmed and they really don't understand the farming industry. They just look and see how much farmland is going for and see
Mm-hmm.
dollar signs.
Exactly.
And 2 of them couldn't get along if you put them in the same room at
Mm-hmm.
all. And so that conversation is much different. Then I'm not wanting to do automatic transfers because we can already see that that's going to
There's a problem.
that could create much bigger and more expensive legal issues than a probate,
Mm.
potentially a trust. But that changes the conversation. So we figure out what you have. I'm also in one of the worst tax states, estate tax states.
In Minnesota there?
Yes, Minnesota is
Seriously?
one of the worst. But it's
Worse in what sense? It's very expensive.
we have a
It's very high.
lower exemption.
Oh,
So
lower exemption,
yeah,
meaning?
I'll explain that a bit. So federal estate tax is a thing that applies to everyone in the U.S. And in my state, Minnesota has its own Minnesota estate tax that applies to anybody living in Minnesota or who owns property in Minnesota.
Mhm.
If you have a Minnesota, please come to Minnesota, everyone, and buy a cabin. However, your cabin will have a little bit of Minnesota estate tax on it.
Okay.
But everyone, so when someone passes away, their taxable estate, which is different than their normal estate. Remember, we said
Mhm.
stuck things.
Yes.
Well, taxable estates are stuck things and things that transfer automatically. Basically, anything that moves because you died. So that's life insurance and anything else. And everyone's taxed technically, but everyone gets an exemption. And federally, the exemption is over $11 million for one person. If you're a married couple, the surviving spouse gets to use the first spouse's exemption. So that's millions and millions of dollars
So
go.
that's like between the couple is 22
Yes.
million or something,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. So there are very few people that are going to write a check for federal estate taxes.
Mm.
In Minnesota, our exemption is 3 million. Now that's a huge number, right?
Yeah.
All of us would like to have a net worth of 3 million.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to keep in mind that that includes a life insurance payout. So if you're a couple with young kids and something happens to the both of you, you could have some life insurance policies that are bumping you over when you put in your real estate and other things.
Mm-hmm.
So we get a lot of people with farmland who do bump into that.
Yeah.
But it's not a ton. And so a lot of people are wrapped up in the idea of, oh, I need to avoid taxes or I need a trust to avoid taxes. That's only a very, very small portion of people that need to worry about taxes.
Mm.
Even in the worst state in the US for estate taxes, we still don't have even close, not even a majority. It's a very small percentage that actually have a tax problem.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's great. So when they now come to you to say, listen,
Mm-hmm.
Jennifer, please put my affairs in order and everything, what would you now advise them to do? For
Yep.
example, you mentioned 2 situations. One family that a blended family,
Mm-hmm.
and then a family that has 5 kids, for example.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember how we got on taxes.
what advice would
Yeah.
you give to either family?
Right. So the first family, I'm probably saying, let's try and avoid probate. Let's do whatever
Okay.
we can to look at your assets and know what
The
they are.
first family of the blended family.
No, sorry. The family with one child they trust implicitly.
Okay.
With an in-law that's great
That is
and
straightforward, though.
very straightforward family. Then we're looking at what they own, and then we're trying to get as many of those things to transfer automatically.
Okay.
So that the surviving child can simply go to the bank and say, "Oh, I'm a designee on the bank account." Can go to the attorney, and the attorney looks up the deeds and says, "Oh, you're a beneficiary on a transfer on death deed." And then when we see those things moving automatically, we aren't worried about what's in a will. We aren't worried about what's
how to convert it to cash for the survivor.
well, and the survivor
I
can take
mean,
everything in and liquidate it themselves, and they do that by
liquidated.
virtue of being the owner, not because of running any estate. So for that family, we're trying to avoid probate, and we're trying to do that in very easy ways. For the complicated family, then
For
depending
the
on what
blended
the
family,
blended family, we've got
that's
a
where the
farming
issue.
kid, we've got two kids that don't get along, we got one that's married
Yeah.
to a crazy person. Then we look at two options. We either say we set up a trust and try to put as much into the trust or be governed by the terms of the trust as we can. That's kind of the nuclear option. Or in some cases we say, well, we don't really know what rules we want to have, but we do want to have an orderly process where there's oversight. Again, in my state, it's not, the cost of doing a trust in my state and the cost of doing a probate for most families are about equal for most situations. So there are some that are the Prince estate should have absolutely had, but that's another thing. But for most families, they're probably going to be about equal. And
Equal, right?
yeah, and so unless we see some particular benefit to a trust, then I'll say let's plan to go through probate, and try to do that as efficiently as
And
possible.
in other words, the common denominator here that you're explaining is that one shouldn't be scared of probate. Probate seems to be the best thing to go through.
Well,
No,
not
I
the
mean,
best
I
thing.
wouldn't say the best, but
It's depending on your state,
ideally,
not necessarily the worst, right?
not the worst, right?
So it really, again, depends on your family situation, the types of assets you have, and what state you're in. And in my state, because it's not so bad, there are a lot of people that we say, let's plan to go through probate. Let's plan to do a will. If we try to avoid probate, but we know that there's something that they want to do that's different than what the state wants to do, we still do a will because maybe something will be stuck. You never, they could win the lottery. They could have the winning lottery ticket one day and get hit by a bus the next.
Oh, I know,
you
right?
know, so there's always a possibility that they get something new and then don't keep it up. And that slides into what do they do after they complete the documents that's going to get them in the right plan, and they get their financial stuff organized to coordinate with that plan. What do they do moving forward? Well, the most important thing is when you get something new, you understand how you own it, and you understand what happens to it when you pass away. And you understand your plan well enough to say, is this coordinated already with the plan, or do I need to do something different?
Okay.
So it can be, the financial organization is an ongoing process, like any organization. You get something new.
Because
You have to
yes, you get
coordinate.
something new, you have to declare, oh, okay, maybe you started acquiring property or so from 30, 35 or whatever. And as you do build up your portfolio, you have to declare what you have, right? And then come to.
Well, and the important thing is, so let's say that you do an estate plan when your kids are little, and then later on you put money into a mutual fund. Then you understanding your plan, you can then say, okay, what do I tell the financial advisor as far as owning it? Should I be owning it jointly with my spouse? For most people, the answer is probably yes. What do I put as beneficiaries? And if your kids are adults, that's an easy question. But if they aren't, then what do you do? And that's where your estate planning attorney, who's
And that's where
put
you
it all
have to get,
together.
so that's, I mean, when your kids are like minors, so that's where you have to get somebody trustworthy
Yeah.
to take care of that area, right?
Yes.
In
And
case anything happens.
yeah, and I get a lot of parents of young kids who say, well, our estate plan won't be complicated because we don't have a lot of stuff. Well, you also have a very important role in someone else's life. And so until those kids are adults, you have the most complicated plan.
Absolutely.
um, uh, like wealthiness, you have to reach a really high bar for that wealthiness to add complication, right? People um, who have the house, maybe they own their home and that's it, really. Up to $3 million in my world, because being in Minnesota, their plans look fairly similar. If they don't have minor kids and if their kids generally get along, their plans are going to look fairly similar. It's just one person maybe has more things that they have to organize into their
Right.
plan. So kind of the attitude of, well, my estate plan is going to be simple because I'm not a millionaire. It's like, yeah,
You hear that all the time, right?
right. Or I'm a lot better off than I was when I had young kids and did a plan. Is it much more complicated? And it might actually get a lot less complicated because kids are older and we're not dealing with taxes.
Yeah.
So,
and like you said, the more minimalistic, the better, right?
yes,
As regards the estate. Because the
that's
larger the estate, the larger the complications.
that's kind of my thing is, if you get something, know why you're getting it, and what it's doing for you and what it's getting you out of. And sometimes there can be things that people try to sell you that are not going to bring you any value and just add complication to your life. And that's what we're trying to avoid.
Very true. Very true. So one has to the wheat from the chaff kind of thing and decide.
Definitely. I feel like there's a lot of that in my in
Yes,
my world.
I know. I know. So have you had any client that has come to you to confide in you, so to speak, to say, oh, I regret not doing this, or I regret not doing that, that you feel could serve as like a lesson or deterrent,
Oh,
you know?
well, I think this is part of the reason why our industry is so hard to teach people how to do appropriately, because we can't use in real life examples. Everything that I deal with clients, it's like Vegas, right? But what I can say is that a prevalent problem is that financial organization piece, and not coordinating or understanding what they have. Here's actually another good example is our last car purchase. My husband was the only one who could go get it, and so it was just easier to put his name on the car title. And that's a piece of organization that's a little out of whack, because if something happens to him, the idea is everything would, then I would
Belongs to him.
Right. And so that is technically a probate asset for him. Now, in my state, that alone wouldn't trigger the need for me to go to court. It'd be a very simple process for me to try and resolve that. But there is an estate to deal with. And so that's a little piece of
And it's part of the assets, right? So yeah, that is it. So in other words, financial organization and staying on top of matters and everything, and also coordination. Those are the two very key aspects of estate planning.
Yes.
Yeah. So that our viewer knows that is extremely important. Wow, this is eye-opening, Jennifer. Thank you so much for
There's
this.
so much information out there, so I'm so happy.
I don't know. I'm
so excited that I was able to talk to you.
Yeah, these questions were like, I mean, I need to come up with something, and these are the questions that I would have asked you if I'd met.
Absolutely.
So I hope I've done a good job, so to speak, and I've kind of brought out everything that you feel would have been very important for the viewer to listen. And you've said it in layman's English, so everybody can really understand, where you're coming from. Awesome. This is great. Thank you so much. So, what's going to happen to you now? Are you at work? Are you at home?
I'm at home. I'm at home, and we're gonna head out to dinner here shortly. So that'll
Oh,
be great.
that's
Um,
awesome. So, I mean, apart from work and everything, how do you find time to unwind? What do you do?
um, that's a very good question. I have
Oh,
4 little kids,
bless
so
you.
the
You've
time
been
is
busy,
very
girl.
yeah. Um, um, one of the big ways I'm very much into Minnesota sports. So
What
tomorrow,
sport?
any
Oh,
yeah,
nice.
I'm a homer.
Oh, Homer. Oh, yeah,
Like
right.
anything
Minnesota girl.
right, right. Anything that's attached to a Minnesota team, then I'm
Mm-hmm.
following.
Oh,
But
bless.
and tomorrow's a big day because this is recording the day before a playoff game, so
Oh, wow.
I will
So the
definitely be watching
playoff,
that.
you and family, you're
Yeah,
going to be watching that, right?
right. Yep,
That's nice. Oh,
yep.
so awesome. So
Um,
I won't keep you longer.
all
I'll
right.
just, sign out first and then sign you away,
Well,
right?
one thing I will kind of do, because if you're watching this and you
Mhm,
feel a little like, wow, there's so much more to this than I thought,
mhm,
then go to my website. But that financial organization piece, um, I have a content tab that has a bunch of PDF downloads
mhm.
that help you kind of work through this stuff.
Yes,
And
I've
there's
already
one,
seen it. I've
yeah,
done all my homework, and like I
yes,
said at the beginning of the show, I'm
yeah,
going to send the links and put on
awesome,
on my page and everything,
perfect. Yeah,
so that a lot of people would probably want to read.
yep,
Then yeah,
and there's an asset checklist
asset
that,
checklist.
yep, and
Okay.
that's really like the first step, that if you're watching this, you're thinking, oh my gosh, like I have to do all this stuff and I don't even know, like I don't even know where to start.
Yes,
Start
confusing.
start with that. Just identifying what you have, and then you say, okay, here's what the to-do list would look like. Here's my, this is the bank accounts I have, retirement accounts,
Mm-hmm.
um, and just the the step of listing those things out really helps you. And
Yes.
that's gonna be an important first step.
I'm going to do that. I'm going to share. Oh, definitely. And then if we have any other questions, I hope you don't mind me bringing you back on the show.
Absolutely, anytime.
All right, sweetheart. So let me sign off before I let you go.
Sounds good.
So, my dear audience and friends, there you have it. You've been listening to Jennifer Gumbel, an estate planning attorney who has shared her thoughts and given her advice on what to do and what not to do. I'm going to be sharing her links to the show very soon. So, you guys will go in and have a look at what you need to read up about and any questions. Everything is explained there. I've gone through that, and she's really taken time to really step by step, walk us down the estate planning and legacy issues. Okay. So, for the new guys that are new to this community, if you haven't yet signed up, please like and follow us on Facebook, Cancer Convos with Grace B, and also like and subscribe to Cancer Convos with Grace B on YouTube. I'll be watching out for you. Don't let me down now. All right. Thank you, guys. So, my dear Jennifer, take good care
Yeah, you too. It was
and
a
see you
pleasure.
again. All
Yep,
right.
sounds great. Bye.
Wishing my audience love and light. God bless. Bye.